Welcome, Tobias, to Metallarium Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about Nestor, this new album, Teenage Rebel, and obviously more things related to the metal world in general. So we'll start by asking, so how was the band been during the last years?
Well, it's been great. We've been touring a lot. Not the last year, as we kind of made this album. So we toured a lot until was last show was in August 2023, and then we took a break to finish the album, and then now we're at it again. We were in your neighborhoods. I was going to say we were in Brazil a couple of weeks back, and now we started touring with the Swedish band Europe, and yeah, we're getting back on the road, so to speak.
Hmm, interesting about these aspects. And when did you decide to work on this new Teenage Rebel? For you, when was the time to create a new album?
Well, it's I started thinking about it like by the end of 2022 because there was a lot of fans asking, will there be any new material? And so I started thinking about it 2022, but I also started to write songs or demos at that time as well. So it took me almost 2 years to finish it, and not
Mhm.
3 and 2022, 2020, 1.5 years basically to finish the album.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's 3 years since your first album, Kids in Ghost Town, and I remember that this first album was released at that time by Nipple Records. I think no, it was self-released by you, and now you are
Yeah.
releasing this new album, Teenage Rebel, with one of the biggest labels, especially in the metal in general. So for you, how was the enter to this big label, and how many things changed for you since the beginning when you released the first album compared to this new one?
Well, it's Napalm hasn't changed anything. The thing was, we our plan was to release it independently on our own, and the first album, and we did that. But then we realized there was a lot of fans and listeners who said like, yeah, we love the album, but we can't really get it because you have a web shop in Sweden, and it's going to cost a fortune to bring it to us. So then I thought that we need a distributor, and then I started to talking to different labels, and we ended up at Napalm. But they're great, and with this new album, we've done a lot of promotion together, and one of the reasons we're talking today is Napalm setting up interviews and doing a lot of promotional stuff. So it's great, but of course it's changed a lot. We didn't have any hopes that the Kids in a Ghost Town were going to be that big as it was, and our plan was to do a couple of shows, and that's that, and we did an album but nothing more than that, and all of a sudden we supported Kiss, and we went to the Caribbeans, and we played, had our own festival, sold out everything. So it's been kind of crazy, which feels a bit like pinch your arm and say, is it for real or am I dreaming a little bit?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I understood. So, well, talking about now, especially for this Teenage Rebel, as you can see, we are living in a world that prefers to hear the music just by singles at this time. That's normally now. I remember this kind of promotion was related to the 40s, 50s, and 30s when the music spread at that time just by singles. Now that era come back, and thanks to the platforms the music spread like way. So for you, is it good to promote an album just by singles, or perhaps we are in some way the fall of the play or the playlist or the social medias in general lose the essence to hear music?
Yeah. I think for us, we're a album based band, so for us it's kind of comes quite natural to release a couple of single and videos before we do the album release. But I think social media is great in many ways, but for us it's like we use it, of course, to promote the music, but it's the sorry. I had cashew nuts. It's a bad thing before you start an interview. No, but it's great with social media, but we don't rely on social media. We're really a band that we keep, I believe, still in the whole idea of albums, with one song from the start and one end song and maybe a couple in the middle that would work perfectly on a concert. So social media is super important, but for us it's like secondary, I should say that. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's different times.
Yes.
But the audience we're targeting, they of course on social media, but they don't care that much about it. I think we can see them at shows that they are like we are, like into bands, into music, into albums, and that.
Okay, okay. One thing that captured my attention for this new album is the name Teenage Rebel. And when I hear completely this album, obviously the essence from the music is heavy hard rock from the 70s and 80s, this kind of stuff. It's very related, this kind of music. So, but for you, what is the special meaning that this album has, especially for the name Teenage Rebel? Perhaps you remember something about the lyrics when you was a teenager, or who knows what kind
Yeah.
of experience bring to us this Teenage Rebel.
Well, this whole album is about becoming a teenager in a small town of Sweden where we grew up, and how that was. We grew up like in the late 80s with influences like Kiss and Van Halen and Bon Jovi and bands like this. And this album is totally about that. How, when the rest of the world kind of told you that you cut your hair and get a job kind of a thing, and we kind of still believe that we wanted to become rock stars. So the whole album is about that, that those teenage years before everything really, before you entered um, adultery when you're an adult, basically. So
Yeah.
this is very much retrospective, looking back, thinking about, I remember, on my bike going to school, having Van Halen 5150 in my cassette, in my Sony Walkman, that kind of thing. So this album is about that.
Hmm. Okay, okay. Well, one thing that I will relate with the Teenage Rebel, as you can see, well, you told me a few seconds ago that you grow up at the end of the 80s. As like me, I'm from the 80s too. I
Mm.
grow up from in the all entire 80s. So I remember very well what is to be rebel at that time. I remember
Yeah,
very
yeah,
well. It's very interesting. The rebel 80s and 90s was a great era for the rock and metal music. But now,
yeah,
thanks to the social media, this kind of essence to be rebel lose. Because as you can see, if you are when you, perhaps you remember the Swedish black metal talk about
yeah,
Satanisms, etc. But now, if you are Satanisms, now there's a church. There's a church,
yeah,
there are priests, there are religion, etc. That's funny from so many ways because I remember the Satanism was something against something, but
yeah, yeah, yeah,
now it's a church. Now,
yeah,
as you
yeah.
can see, obviously the trust was the same. The trust was the same on politics, economics, etc. Always the metal bring this kind of aspect to rebel. That's why
Yeah.
the teenage rebel is a huge name to see the metal in many ways.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you, what is your opinion about now this kind of rebel lose the essence thanks to the social media because it's no more rebels in people in the world.
No, I guess so. You're right in that sense that, you have to be so explicit and so much strange to just be a rebel. Back in the day when we, as you said, like the metal scene was like rebelling against church, like, crucifix upside down. It's like, this is metal, the horns up thing. But I think social media has like made, you know, watered everything up. Nothing is nothing really anymore, and no one really stands for nothing, or everyone stands for everything. So I guess, yeah, it's a different thing. For us, when we grew up, Teenage Rebel was like, you didn't have to be criminal, but you could be a rebel anyways. It was like, I wear my patches on my back on my jeans battle vest. And that was rebellious in a way. So yeah, no, I think that kind of with social media things have kind of dried out a bit. I agree on that one.
Yes, well, yeah. And other ways, talking about, yeah, especially from the promotion of this Teenage Rebel, what kind of plans do you have for this new album? Perhaps you will embark more tours. You mentioned that you will embark some gigs
Yeah.
there, and as you mentioned it before, all gigs that you did was sold out, and perhaps you will do more for tours, or perhaps you will come in for the first time and a full Latin American tour. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, we would love to. We actually, when we were in Brazil for the Summer Breeze Festival, I think it's called, in Sao Paulo, a couple of weeks back,
Mm.
we spoke to a promoter there, and they would really like to take us to Latin America. But and we would love to come. It's more about finding loopholes in the schedule. Going to a country like, or not a country, but like Latin
Yeah.
America, it's so big. You have to spend a couple of weeks at least.
Mhm.
But we would love to come there. And now the plan is we start next week by doing Sweden Rock Festival, which is a big one here in Sweden, or in Sweden. I'm in Spain now, but then it's we tour with Europe during the summer, and we're doing a lot of shows, and then we're going on tour in Europe, I think in October. So, but hopefully we'll come to what we do with the new album is just shows, and tours. So.
Mhm. Okay, okay. And talking about now, especially the influence that you have to create this one in general, Nestor. Nestor is, I think Nestor, I don't know, Nestor is like a name, correct? Because here in Latin
Yeah,
America,
correct.
Nestor is a name. So
Yeah,
why
yeah,
do
yeah.
you, and it's very unusual to put a band like Nestor. So
Yeah,
because I think it's Spanish name, Nestor, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Sure.
think so.
You're
Why
not.
do you decide to put a band with Nestor? Perhaps you, as you live in Spain now, right now, has a
uh,
special meeting.
Yeah, yeah. No, the thing is that I don't know, but we started this band 1989 when we were just kids, the same guys, and there's in Europe at least there's a comic book called Tintin. I don't know if you heard about him. He's from Holland, and
Okay.
anyways, Tintin. There's a character. His name is Captain Haddock, and his butler. His butler was named Nestor, and we all
Okay.
like this comic book. So we said like Nestor. That's a great name. This is 1989. So we stayed with the name, and nowadays it's like, as you might know, the Nestor. The meaning of it is the old and wise guy. This king in the Greek mythology. So now it fits quite well. We're kind of old, maybe not wise, but old. But yeah, yeah,
Okay, okay. And for you, what is your opinion about now the one? As you can see, the metal in general are releasing each weekend 30,
yeah,
40, 50 albums per week. That's very
yeah,
some in well, for us, like we work in a website, it's very
yeah,
difficult to catch up every releases. It's very difficult.
yeah,
But for a fan, it's more than difficult than us because they hear
yeah,
just singles, no albums. It's more
yeah,
difficult situation. So what's your
yeah.
opinion about now? Is good or is bad for the scene to have each weekend more than 30, 40, 50 albums?
I think it's bad. I think also it's if I have to be if I'm honest, I think that the hard rock scene since the 80s, so since early 90s, kind of it hasn't improved. Every other genre, like if you look at the pop scene where fuse there's fusions between country, which is super popular now, country and pop and all that. The metal scene or the hard rock scene has just gone numb. It's like everyone is using the same triggers for the drums. Everyone is tuning down to D, and every rock band is angry for some reason. So I think we need to take back that kind of happiness in hard rock, and that kind of uh, you know when bands back in the day like Van Halen, they had a good laugh on stage. They had fun. You could tell that they have fun. I think the rock scene in general is yeah, it's really it hasn't improved in many years. So to these bands just releasing singles and thinking they sound like anyone else, I would say like make an album, see if you can get from point A to point B and have a story to tell, and something actually to tell the audience. I think we're missing that in the hard rock scene nowadays a bit.
Okay, okay, okay. And well, talking about now about especially the return, because I think 5 or 10 years, no, 5 years or 6 years ago, since 6 years ago, we saw that a lot of bands are playing like the bands like the 80s, especially from the 80s, hard
Yeah.
rock, heavy metal, speed metal, or the 70s. So for you, what is your opinion about and now this overpopulation, especially into the heavy hard rock speed, because this old sound bring back again for me a lot of nostalgic because I'm from the 80s, so
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
very well that era. But now for the new people, it's very different because they think that this music is very new.
Yeah. No, but I guess that's good. But as you say, if you're from the 80s, all the Bay Area trash or, new wave of British heavy metal, whatever, you kind of know where the roots are. And for us, Nestor, it's like we always get that question. It's like there's a lot of people saying Nestor is true 80s because they used to be 80s. We started off in the 80s. And I think that is true. But for me, it's if there's kids finding out about Nestor or speed metal band from the 80s, that is great. And yeah, I think that's great just to keep the torch pass the torch, so to speak, that there's a younger audience coming that loves hard rock.
Okay, okay. Well, we're very close to end this interview, Tobias. And for this aspect,
Yeah,
as you can see, after the pandemic, many things happen, and especially in the music
yeah,
industry. As you can see, the flight tickets rise up, the bus tickets, oh, the bus in general rise up. A lot of things happen. I spoke with a lot of musicians about these kind of things, that the prices for to do a tour in Europe, US. There,
yeah,
I think 3 days or 4 days ago, I read the news that the USA raised up the visa
yeah,
things for the new musicians, for the musicians in general.
yeah.
So for you, what will we learn about this post-pandemic era, especially in concert?
I think it's crazy in that sense. What will happen is that less bands will have the possibility to go out and tour, and it's will even in the end it will only be the big ones, the big sharks, the huge, like Kiss used to be, these bands, Coldplay, all these bands. I think that it's in Europe still it's okay. You can travel from Germany to Spain and it doesn't cost that much, and you can play Razzmatazz in Barcelona and you can go to Italy to play Milan. It's fine. But going overseas now and or going to the UK, when they're not in the Brexit anymore, it's expensive, and it's such a struggle and hassle to go there. So I think it's of course bad, but yeah, we would love to. Latin America was quite easy when we went to Brazil. It wasn't too expensive and it was well organized and stuff like that. But I hope that they don't push the prices anymore, because if they do, there won't be an audience coming to watch the shows or listen to the shows.
Hmm. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tobias, the sad times arrive at this interview.
Yep.
I hope you enjoy this one like me. Well, this new
Thank
album
you.
is a great one. I
Yeah.
hear completely more than two, three twice. Twice is a great
Yeah.
one. We will do the review soon. So
Yeah.
perhaps do you want to add something to your Latin American fans that explain your return, perhaps in a full tour here, and obviously
Yeah.
Metallica followers?
Yeah, well, I would like to say thank you for the support. We've been in, as I said, Brazil, and we already met a couple of you guys when we did the Monsters of Rock cruise. And thank you for supporting us, coming to the shows, buying merch, and listening to the music. This is the reason why we can do this. If without you guys, there wouldn't have been no Nestor, and we would be out of it. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to come to Latin America sometime soon. I hope within 8 months. I promise.